Thank you, Sagar, for giving me that introduction. And it was at the age 22 that I met Swamiji. He was living in California at that time in the city of San Francisco, and I had recently graduated from the University of California in Berkeley, and introduced myself to him and told him I wanted to learn the teachings and the technique of Kriya Yoga. And of course he was very accommodating to that, and he invited me to his flat to begin to take classes. And I took those classes, and as he said, when I asked him that question about learning Kriya Yoga, he said a number of phones, okay. Now, we forgot to mention the phones. Turn off the mobile phones. I think everybody would appreciate that as we go forward. I even remembered before coming onto the stage, mobile phone, turned it off. So I met, at that time when I met him, he had asked me to do a few things, and one of the things he said to me was, I want to get to know you before I can teach you Kriya Yoga. And that was the key, of course, coming to know him, not so much maybe him knowing me, but he required me to come to know him, and not just him, but the channel that he was representing, what he was representing. And in this case, he was representing the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and this line of gurus. And that's what we come here today to do. As we come to Mumbai from time to time, Brahmachari Sagar, he acts as the coordinator for Ananda Sangha's work here in Mumbai. We have ashram up in Pune, this is where I stay. But also we have centers in other parts of India as well. And so it's a joy to be able to be here with you to represent these teachings and to represent Yogananda, the guru of this work, and also my teacher, Swami Kriyananda, who passed actually only a few years ago in 2013. Sagar mentioned that we don't often speak to this topic, giving lectures like this. Sometimes, once in a while, we do from time to time. And he was a bit joking with me some time ago when this class topic came up, and because he was encouraging me, please give an introductory lecture on the topic of the chakras. But I was reluctant, and I didn't want to do it. And I'd like to begin perhaps on that negative note of saying why I was a little bit reluctant, but also why it is actually a good topic to speak about. And so those two things seem incongruous, but let me explain. For one, we only have a little bit of time today. This is a very massive subject, very deep subject. It requires a certain amount of preparatory understanding, and we cannot cover all of that material in a short time, in a short lecture. An audience that perhaps have many different levels of understanding of this topic. So in one sense, I felt reluctant because we could not do the topic justice. And so, with that in mind, Sagar has agreed to follow this up, not date yet to be unknown, with a longer workshop, which it really demands. I can give an introductory lecture, discourse, but for the workshop and for the details and the minutiae that I know some people are interested, those types of things, I'm not going to discuss those so much today. I want to stay more on the topic of the principles at hand, but nevertheless, that would be unfair to you to raise your curiosity and not be able to go further into it with the details. And so Sagar has promised he will set up a workshop to go into some of those aspects in the future. Yes? That was a little bit of the agreement. The other, and perhaps maybe the more significant reluctance that I had was, imagine that you live in a beautiful city. You live in Mumbai. And let's say somewhere in this city there's a very, very beautiful garden. You've read about it in the newspaper. Perhaps you've even read books about it, it's so famous. Perhaps even you've driven by it at times, but never bothered to go in. But you know it's there, you heard about it, people have talked about it. But like many people who live in a big city with famous attractions in that city, they themselves never bothered to go visit them. Only the tourists come, you might say, to go visit them. And so imagine that. Well, we live in such a situation. We live next to a beautiful garden. You might say a palace with wonderful gardens and fountains inside. But unfortunately, there's a bit of a wall around that garden. But although it's very close, closer than you realize, how many people bother to go visit that garden? Even though they hear about it, they read books about it, they wonder about, and they've heard discussions about what's inside that garden. But they never bother to take the effort to actually brave the traffic, perhaps, overcome the obstacles, to actually go visit that garden, because it takes work to go visit that garden. And you know what I'm talking about here, is we have that garden within each one of us. We have a paradise. All mystical literature talks about an inner kingdom. Christ in the Bible says to Peter, to you I give the keys to the kingdom. There's an inner kingdom that's being talked about, and what are those keys? That's what we want, is we want those keys. We have to get those keys to be able to enter into that kingdom. And once we do, we for ourselves can experience. Now, my reluctance to talk about this, or to talk about that garden, that inner garden within ourselves, is that many people, like perhaps they want to go visit a foreign country, they're satisfied with reading the brochure, the travel guide. They never have the impetus to actually go. That's enough. And in that case, especially for the topic we're talking about today, I'm a bit afraid that it'll be a distraction, and that people will not actually say, they'll say, well, that's enough. I don't need to do anything more. But that's not the case. And with that, because that, just reading about something, being you might say an armchair tourist, is not enough in this case. You have to experience these. We cannot speak and outwardly express those inner experiences, but I hope we can raise your curiosity to be able to make that journey for yourself, to go into that garden. And what's required, really, for us to do is not so much at this stage. We have a mixed audience here, but for most of us, I think I can say, at this stage, what the effort needs to be expended toward is getting to that garden gate and knocking on the door. And then the door, with enough knocking, you'll open that door. So we have to get to that gate and open that gate and go into that garden. That's our job, to talk about what's in that garden. Well, it has a good side to that. It arouses your curiosity. You say, I want to go there. I want to see that. I want to experience it for myself. And if we can do that with this discourse, then I think we've accomplished something. If it impels you to taking action, that's what I'd like. Because oftentimes, particularly what I notice on this topic of inner realities, you might say astral phenomena, which chakras to some degree is in that realm, that people are willing to speak about on that level, but perhaps not necessarily to do the work to get to that reality, because that does going to take work. That takes work, it takes commitment. I had a young lady come speak with me a few years ago, and she had graduated. I had known this young lady for a number of years, many years, and she had graduated from school, college, and she got a job. But she discovered something that maybe many of you discovered as well. She didn't like working. She had a job for about a year and a half maybe, and she quit. And she went home, lived with her parents, and basically remained idle for years. I think she's still idle, actually. It's been a number of many years since. Not doing anything, really, just staying home, passing the time, idle pursuits. She came to me and she said, Jaya, I want some advice. I think I have problems with my chakras. They're blocked. They're preventing me from going out and doing something in life. They're preventing me from doing this. They're preventing me from doing this chakra's manifesting in this way, and that chakra's manifesting. I can feel imbalance in these two chakras. And I said, whoa, wait. You're speaking nonsense. What you need to do is go out and get a job. I think that's what's going to balance your chakras. Get a job and do something constructive with your life. And that's where we need to start for most of us. Because to speak about these things on this other level, that's not going to solve. We don't have the reality of an experience of to really be able to work on that level. We have to work and be honest with ourselves and approach life on the level that we live on and be successful in that and do the practical thing. And then, step by step by step, we begin to take positive directions in life. But that's not to say that this is not a good topic to talk about, because the chakras are like hidden vortices of energy within us that influence us in all manner of ways. And to the degree that we can influence that, that's to our benefit. That's what we want to do. And so the question is going to be, what do we do? What do we do about this? What can we do? How can we approach this to make this our lives successful? By being able to understand, put our attention on, and then do something practical to make a change in our lives. And if we know the roadmap, you might say, to get to a destination, then we can follow it, and then we can be aware of what will work and what will not work. Now, this is such the chakras are so, they're a reality that's so close to us. It's part of us. It's who we are. It's behind, you might say, behind the curtain. That's there, you might say, directing much of what happens out in front. But yet we don't have any particular experience of them in our outward life. We hear about them. We think we don't have, but actually we do. But yet, it seems like these realities that we hear about are not accessible. And you might say there's a couple of major reasons. One is we don't have a dynamic in our day-to-day life awareness of the chakras. And there are two major reasons for that. One is it's blocked. Our ability to perceive is blocked or drowned out, you might say. It's drowned out by the noise. If you're listening to something very subtle, very, very gentle, in the middle of the traffic circle, you're not going to be able to hear it. And so it is with us. We have the senses at full volume. And it doesn't allow us to be able to hear those subtle realities within ourselves. So you could say the first thing is we have to stop the noise. How do we stop the noise? And of course, we'll come to that. But we have to stop the noise to be able to hear or perceive that which is much more subtle. And the other aspect of it is the chakras will begin to manifest as we develop a strong flow of energy within ourselves. There was a story of Paramahansa Yogananda's that in America, he visited with a fellow who was a monk in the Christian tradition. And he was a good man. This man was a good man, but they were discussing, and Yogananda asked him about his spiritual practices. And he asked the monk, "Do you ever see lights?" And this monk had been meditating and practicing for a long time. He says, do you ever see lights or perhaps angels or something like that? And the man said, when God wants to reveal such things to me, he will do so in his own time. Now that sort of sounds like a good answer, or a humble answer, you might say. But Yogananda says, no, it's not so. The reason you don't see these things is your devotion is lackluster. If your devotion was firmer and stronger, these things would come to you. And I think, I read that, I remember I heard that Swami Kriyananda tell that story, and I said, yes, don't blame the instrument if perhaps you don't play it very well. It's our fault. We don't play the instrument well. Is our devotion more than lackluster? If that devotion is strong, these things will begin to manifest. You may know that one of the manifestations of the chakras is each of these chakras have certain colors and lights and so on attached to them. And you might say, so Yogananda was asking, do you see any lights or any light when you're praying in your meditation? And if you're a meditator, we're taught in Yogananda's tradition at least, and many other traditions as well, we're taught to look here at the point between the eyebrows and keep our eyes uplifted and look in this area here. You might think of it as a movie screen. Inner experiences manifest there. And when people speak about seeing a great light, I saw a great light, this is where they see that in this point here. Whenever you have a very strong flow of upward movement of energy in the spine, in the deep spine, we'll come to this. In the deep spine, a strong flow of energy will manifest as light at the point between the eyebrows. And you'll see that light. And sometimes you see that light as different colors, different manifestations, which happens to be where that flow in the deep spine is most strong. And it'll project there at that point between the eyebrows. And so, if you want to have these experiences that we're speaking of, create and stimulate that strong devotional flow of life force in the spine within you. When your devotion is strong, these things will manifest. But of course, seek God or seek devotion, not the fruits of devotion. That's a basic principle. Don't go for the fruits, go for God, go for the devotion itself. Now, I'd like to begin this discussion of chakras a little bit more. One, by just making sure we all understand a little bit about what we're speaking about when we're speaking of the chakras. The chakras are energy centers within the body, or you might say they're within the bodies, plural. These chakras are energy centers, because we have, contrary to what some people think, we actually have more than one body. We have, as the tradition goes in the yogic teachings, we have 3 bodies. As the Spirit descended, God, for whatever his lila meaning of it is, made this creation. As creation descended into greater manifestation, just as steam condenses into water and finally condenses into solid form of ice, so too this creation descended and manifests for each soul 3 bodies. The first is said to be a body, an ethereal body, a body of thought. This is known as a causal body. There's based principles upon which the body that descends from it are based upon. And this thoughts, ideas, principles, this causal body manifests. And from that, descending further or condensing further, you might say. You might even think of it this way as vibration. Vibration, very fine, and it becomes a little bit more gross, and it descends into what's known as an astral body. This is a body of energy, pranic body. And when we speak traditionally, when people use the term chakras, they're really speaking about this level. They're centers of energy in this pranic body, this astral body, upon which you could say forms the plan upon which this physical body is built. Now, the chakras manifest also in the physical body. They manifest as the various nerve plexes that you find in the spinal column, in the brain itself, and the brain stem, and the various plexes of nerves that go out to control the body. Well, these are on a subtler level reflected in the astral body as well. And these when we speak of the astral chakra points, in today's discussion I'll use the Sanskrit terms for the chakras, and when we speak about the physical points, I'll use the English terms. So consequently, I'll speak about the coccyx center. That's those nerve plexes there at the base of the spine, at the very base. But in the Sanskrit term, you say Muladhara. And so, but same, but you might say to distinguish between the two. But these chakras exist even in thought form as well, in the causal body as well. There's causal body of the chakras as well. You could say that it is the chakras, these points of energy, or as Yogananda liked to use the term, substations. Think of it as energy that comes into the body to manifest these bodies. Energy enters into the body, as Yogananda said, in this physical body through the medulla oblongata, the Yajna chakra, and distributes itself through this body into these chakras, which act as substations. Just as the electrical grid delivers power from the dam here to the city, and there's substations here which then distribute that energy out into the body. So it is with these chakra points. They distribute the energy out into the body. But the chakra on all three of these levels, that's what knits these three bodies together, keeps them together, and embraces them. And so in order for us to understand what we're speaking about these chakras, I'd like us to begin with a little exercise in your seat. And in this exercise, I want you to identify in your own bodies these chakra points in your bodies. And I'm going to do that by asking you to tense and relax various muscle groups in the spine itself associated with these chakras. And so it's best if you do this, if you can sit. These chairs make it a little difficult to sit up straight, but if you can sit up straight, please do. Sit up straight, and while you're doing this, I would recommend that you close your eyes while you do this, and look upward with eyes gently looking upward into this frontal area of the brain, and then but keep the eyes relaxed, but just generally looking up in this area, the darkness there. Now, interestingly enough, and I suspect there's enough people here that we'll get a few people will have this happens to. Sometimes when you tense and relax, a light will manifest at the point between the eyebrows. Now, I'm not saying that this is a chakra light. I'm not saying that, because it could be many things. But sometimes it's physical, but whatever. Sometimes a little bit of tension and concentration upon an individual point in the spine will actually stimulate it, and there'll be a stimulation and light being one of the manifestations, expressions of a chakra. Sometimes there'll be a little on and off there, but the idea here is to look into the darkness here behind closed eyes as if it's a television screen, but your attention, your focus of your mind is going to be on the point of the muscles tensing. So I want you to tense the muscles and feel in the spine the gathering of energy at that point. And just try to put your mind in the middle of that energy point, and then we're going to then release, and as it releases, just feel the release of that energy. Now, as that release energy is released, try to mentally direct it upward to the brain. So it says through your tension, you're gathering together the loose energy that is there in that area, pulling it to a point, and then as you release, you're sending it up, okay? But the purpose of this exercise is to have you become aware of these points in the body. As we speak today, we'll have a common understanding of what it is, okay? So let's begin by, let's sit up straight, and just to relax the body, let's take a deep breath. Inhale, tense the body, whole body, and now throw the breath out and relax. And in a relaxed manner, gather together the energy and the muscles associated with the anus, and tighten those anal muscles and feel a gathering of energy, tension at that point. Looking upward with the eyes, but your inner attention is at that point. Now, release the tension and feel at that point. Feel the radiation or relaxation of energy and gently nudge it upward. Now, go 1.5 inches up above that point, behind the sexual muscles in the physical body. This is the sacral center, Swadhisthana area. Tense those muscles. Pull the muscles in and tense. Relax and release gently, releasing the energy upward. Now pull in the navel and feel there behind the navel in the spine. Feel a gathering of life force there. This is Manipur. Release, gently release upward. Now in the heart, pull the shoulder blades together. Gather the life force there in the spine. And release. Now the throat's a little bit hard at the base of the throat, that little hollow there, right above that. Kind of tense there. Maybe you need to tilt the head a little bit. Gather the life force there. And release. Now, at the back of the head, the medulla oblongata, that hollow in the back of the head, let's tense there, tense. And release. And now this sixth chakra this is the negative pole. It has a positive pole at the point between the eyebrows. So knit your eyebrows. Feel there at the point between the eyebrows, looking into that point, and release. Now it's a little bit hard to feel at the top of the head, but you can imagine energy there at the top of the head. Gathering up all the energy through magnetism, drawing it all up to the top of the head. Okay, good. Now, these chakra points, they control various parts of the body. The Muladhara at the base of the spine, these controls the legs, and the elimination, body elimination. The Swadhisthana and sacral center controls the sexual muscles and the sexual reproductive organs. The Manipur chakra in the stomach and the navel. This area, the internal organs in the stomach in this area, and also digestion and assimilation of food. Here in the heart, we have, of course, the heart itself, and the upper body, the chest, the lungs, and the arms. This is the nerves radiating out from that place. And here, the throat. This area controls the throat, the neck, also the voice. This is at this point. And the medulla oblongata, of course, a very important point because it controls the autonomic nervous system in the physical body. The heartbeat, and it actually controls the lung or the breathing process. It's said to be the negative pole of this Agya chakra, and the positive pole is said to be here at the point between the eyebrows. And this is, of course, the seat of enlightenment at this point, here. And the Sahasrara, is at the top of the head, and this is said to be the seat of liberation. But also, you could think of it as the master controller of everything. It's the in charge of everything in the brain. Now, I mentioned this medulla oblongata, and I mentioned the point between the eyebrows, this Kutashta center, or this third eye, sometimes it's called that as well. These are the same, but they're positive and negative poles of those two. And not only does this sixth chakra have a positive and negative pole, every chakra has a positive and negative pole. But these two happen to be more distinct than the others. But every chakra has a positive and negative pole. Now, when I say the word negative or positive, I don't mean it in the sense of good and bad. That's not really what I'm saying. I'm not saying, oh, this is, that's good, that's bad. I'm saying positive and negative in terms of polarity, like a magnet. You see, now is the negative pole of the magnet worse than the positive pole of the magnet? It's directional, that's all it is. It's directional. Now, so each of these chakras has a positive and negative pole. The positive pole of any chakra is that pole of the chakra that basically is directing life force up toward spirit, toward the brain. In the if you want to look at it in the physical sense, it's directing spirit up, or you could say inward even. It's drawing it inward. The negative pole is the energy that is going down or out into the world of matter, into the world of involvement, into the world of physicality. Remember, these chakras, when we're speaking on the chakra level, are in the astral body. The plexes are in the physical body. The chakras are these, where we're speaking here, this energy, and that is the energy moving out toward the physical world, or is it moving inward up toward the spirit? That's how you would think of positive and negative. So every chakra has these two sides. The energy is moving one way, or the energy is moving another way. Now, I'm going to come back to that point, because this is the central point when we speak about working with the chakras, is which direction is the energy moving at those chakras, and which direction do we want it to move? But also, just so that we understand the anatomy of this a little bit better, you have the spine, the astral spine we're speaking, or this physical spine. You have these 6 lower chakras below the Sahasrara. The Sahasrara is not polarized. The other two, the polarization takes place when we're in, something is polarized them, something is magnetized them into positive and negative. And that's the movement of current in the spine. And there is a current that moves regularly in the spine. With every breath, that current is moving. You could say that current is the breath. As the breath moves, there's a current. Now, this is referenced in the Gita, chapter 4, maybe? I think the yogi pours the prawn into the apon, and he pours the apon into the prawn, if you know your Gita scripture. But this reference is of these currents that are moving, the prawn and the apon current that are moving in the spine. And the yogi merges those two. That's what he's referencing. And that's actually a direct reference to the process of Kriya Yoga. But he merges those two. Well, these two currents are moving continually in the spine. And as they move up, the physical, in the astral spine, as the life force moves up, the physical body, what do you think it does? It inhales. When the current moves down in the astral spine, the body exhales. We would think of it, the person who is identified in the physical body would think of, oh, when I inhale, the current's going to go up. When I exhale, but it's actually the other way around. It's the astral body is the causative effect. The physical body is the reflection of what's happening. And just as it's a more subtle, more essential part of who we are than the physical body, it's the plans upon which this physical body has been created. So it's more essential. Now, so you have this polarity, this movement of two currents. This is known as these two channels in which these Pran and Apon currents move in. You may have heard of these names before. They're the Irda and the Pingala. These are two nerve channels that I hope I'm not getting too esoteric here with these terms, but we have to set the beginning here. There's these nerve channels. Now, they go up and down. Now, some people always go, well, don't they go in this motion? Or, no, let's forget that. We don't need to go into that detail. But they're going up and they're going down. In the center, there's a third channel. And of course, in the physical body, there's a spine. And actually, I think there are sympathetic nerve system in the physical body. But in this astral body, there's a central nerve channel known as the Sushumna. This is the Sushumna. And I think this is somewhat common knowledge, a little bit, not too common, but and this is like when we have, let's say, the Triveni, any place. Well, why do they hold the Kumbh Mela at Allahabad? It's because the three currents come together there. What three currents? There's Ganges and there's Yamuna. Where's the third one? Saraswati. But where's that? It's hidden, right? It's hidden. Well, so, and that's the Sushumna, of course, is you have those three currents represented. So you have that in the spine. Well, now, we have these three channels. We have these six, I'm keeping the Sahasrara out of this conversation for now. We have the six chakras below that, each one positive and negative by polarity, because whenever you have movement of current, just like a physical dynamo, you create a magnet, you create an electromagnet with the movement of energy up and down. It creates magnetism, which is polarity. So you have this energy moving in the spine, polarizing it into positive and negative poles. So you have 12 by polarity. Well, if you are an astrologer, you would notice there's a relationship here too. 12 by polarity. Now, obviously, there's 12 houses, we're not going there today with this discussion because that's one of those things this isn't an astrology class, but that's something Sagar perhaps could talk about in his workshop. 12, you have the houses, they're related to the houses of the zodiac. And of course, each of the chakras also has a ruling planet associated with them. Now, if you read books, many of these details that I'm going to talk about or mention, I won't go into them, but I'll mention them, are debatable. One person will say, oh, no, it's this way. Another, oh, no, it's this way. Well, this way that I'm speaking is in Master Yogananda's tradition. So if it doesn't correlate with something you've read, what I'm reflecting is the tradition that a God-realized guru, this is the way he and his student, Swami Kriyananda, passed this on. So they, and particularly, I mention this here because there's association with planets. And Saturn, Jupiter, Saturn, Jupiter, Mercury, Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. Mars. Saturn, I'm not the astrologer type. Saturn, Jupiter, Mars. Venus. Of course, Venus is the heart. So Venus, Mercury, and also Moon and Sun, which would be the traditional planets of the zodiac. And of course, you get in, there's other aspects of it, the nodes of the, the Rahu, Ketu, and all of that. I am not an astrologer, so I can't go into any depth on that. But nevertheless, these aspects are part of that too. And you can see, I mention these because a certain synthesis begins to take place in the deeper teachings, that there's a relationship between these. And so what we have is we have the descent of spirit into matter, coming down into matter, descending through this causal body, forming this astral body, forming this physical body, and as it comes down, it then manifests. And you could say there's an inner astral astrology to this whole thing. At the same time, we realize that we find that these chakras, there's a certain descent that takes place. You can see in the body as well, as in these chakras as well. The elements are expressed. The essential elements are expressed in the chakras. Ether, air, ether being the fifth chakra here, air, fire, water, and earth at the base. These five at the lower ones. And it's also said, Yogananda in his teachings, passing down the tradition from his Param Guru Lahiri Mahashaya, speaking about the chakras, also mentioned that the Pandava brothers are also represented in the chakras. Sahadev, Nakula, Arjuna, Bhima. Bhima had a big heart. And of course Yudhishthira here at, and there are certain qualities that you can see also associated with that, because it's very generally understood in the yogic tradition that here in the throat is the center for deep calmness, expansive calmness. And you'll find that sometimes in your life, you'll feel this deep sense of calmness. And if you're very sensitive, you'll see that it begins to emanate from here. And a very wise thing to do is to be able to stimulate that calmness when you speak, as needed. When you're trying to make something, you want to calm it down. If you learn to be able to bring that deep calmness in your voice, and of course Yudhishthira was the wise guiding elder brother who was able to guide the other brothers in this way. Of course, Bhima here in the heart, and Arjuna. This third chakra here, the Manipur, is associated with fire. Mars is the planeteer, of course, of fire, but it's also associated with fiery self-control. And of course, Arjuna was the great warrior. Bhima had great heart, but Arjuna was the greatest of the warriors, you see. And he had that fiery self-control. He could control himself. And then from that came victory in what he would do. And then, of course, Nakula, representing the power to follow the prescriptions of Niyama. And Sahadev, of course, at the base of the spine, being the power to follow the Niyama, or the Yama, to follow the proscriptions of Yama, to be able to represent that. And so in each of these ways, I mentioned these, is each of these chakras has various qualities, but they also symbolically represent something. And so what I'd like to do is, I cannot take the time to go into the depth of every one of these chakras, but I'm going to focus a little bit on the first one, the Muladhara chakra. If you come to Sagar's workshop, he'll go into all of these in greater depth. But I chose this one because you could say it's where we begin. And I think all of us at some level are beginners. We're beginning. And also I mention it because when people say, oh, you're really rooted in the Muladhara chakra, it's somewhat meant as an insult. And I want to clarify that a little. I want to clarify that because we cannot begin And all of this study of these sorts of topics, the purpose of it, given by Yogananda, by his disciple Kriyananda, and in a sense why he taught them and instructed us, the purpose of all of these is to come to an understanding for our spiritual development. You see, not for the associated powers that are, each of these have associated powers, and I'll leave that again to Sagar, but it's not for that reason why we, or the strengths or those things that can be delivered. It's for our spiritual development as human beings, whether we're, as mentioned, whether we're Indians, Americans, Chinese, Europeans, Hindus, Christians, Muslim, Buddhists, whatever it might be, everybody follows the same pathway. It's not that Buddhists have it arranged in another, and the Chinese have it in another order. It's not that at all. We are all essentially made the same. And our liberation, which is what we're after, our liberation takes place in a central pathway. Paramahansa Yogananda said this in a very interesting way in one of his books. He said, the path to God is through your very own nervous system. Now, he also, that sounds very physical, but he said you have to have great love for God to walk that path. But you see, what he's meant was, that love for God summons up the life force within us, and it travels a certain pathway. And when he meant nervous system, he didn't necessarily mean just this physical nervous system. He meant that inner nervous system that takes us to that garden gate so that we can enter into that garden gate. So I'd like to just mention a few things about, in talking about the Muladhara, coming back to that point where I said positive and negative polarity. All these chakras are positive and negative. They have it. And the same thing with each of them. The highest has polarity. No matter, if you take a magnet, it has a positive pole, it has a negative pole. If you cut the magnet, so let's say you favor the positive pole. I want to get more of the positive pole, so you decide to cut off the end of the positive pole of the magnet. And you now think, oh, I've got a real positive magnet now. And you test it, and lo and behold, what's happened is that little piece of the magnet now has a positive side and it has a negative side. And no matter where you cut the magnet, there's always going to be a positive and negative side. And if you look at this in terms of us as spiritual beings, every one of us, in all of our qualities, we have a positive side to things that we're doing, we have a negative side. Now, your negative and another person's negative may be very different, but relative to yourself, there's a direction. We want to go in a positive direction, but what is positive for you may not be positive for somebody else. Swami Kriyananda used to, when he would mention these things, he says, remember, even a saint, as long as there's a little bit, they're not completely liberated, you see, not completely free, but they're great, everybody would consider them a saint. They have a negative side. They're polarized still too. As long as you're breathing the free air of this world and you're in the body of some sort, you're polarized. And so he would say, a great saint, maybe his negative side is, instead of sleeping only 2 hours a night, he's sleeping 3. That might be a negative thing. It's a tamasic thing for him. But of course for you and I, we're trying to get up in the morning. And so for us, you can't compare. And I think the lesson here is don't compare yourself to anybody else. Are you moving in a positive direction for yourself, of where you are, where you grew up, and have you look back on your life and you say, have I made some progress? Have I moved positively in a positive direction? So every one of these chakras also have positive and negative. And so consequently, if you look at each chakra, they have certain qualities that are related to them. Now I mentioned that the Muladhara chakra, its ruling planet is Saturn. And Saturn has a bit of a constricting element to it. Well, some of the positive qualities of the Muladhara chakra would be it's very good for being firm. Earth sign. It's an earth sign planet, or an earth sign chakra. That's it's the ether, air, earth. It's firm. A good yoga posture for that might be the Vajrasana. It'd be probably it sits you very firm in your meditation. It's not only, it's firm, it's also not physically firm only. It's very firm in terms of its intentions. In other words, it's steadfast. It's persistent. If you give it something to do, it's going to do it and stick to it. This is good. If it sticks to truth, if it has a truth, it sticks to it. It's firm in its principles. It's loyal. Loyalty is, you could say, the foundation upon which the spiritual, this path begins. I'm not speaking only of loyalty to a guru, loyalty to truth, loyalty to yourself, loyalty to your intentions. It all begins with that. And this is why I was saying to this young lady, for her, she was sort of up here. And I said, just get a job, get firm, get a foundation under yourself. If you never build that foundation, you're never going to be able to build a strong spiritual path upon it. Have you ever noticed this? Now the next chakra up, to jump in, just to compare it to, is this Swadhisthana. It's a water sign. Now, you can imagine, think about this. Water, earth, firm, flowing. Now, that's good. I mean, that can be very good. Adaptable is the positive way to say that. Now, if you were go back to that Muladhara, he's firm, but he can't change. He's firm to truth as he sees it and becomes dogmatic. He sticks to it, but when something happens, he can't change. He's stubborn. You see, now, those positive qualities, when looked on in that light, you think, oh, well, wait a minute, I don't know. Maybe I don't want those qualities. But yes, you do. You do want those positive qualities, but you want to bring out the positive side of those qualities. And so each of these chakras, we want to bring out the positive. And it begins with the Muladhara chakra. If we don't have firmness, then we can't get started, because that person who is in the water element, you might say very strong there, sometimes it's associated also in the sacral center with artistic creativity. Would be something very flowing, adaptable. And now I happen to have a daughter. She's well grown up now on her own, but she's an artist. And so I've been attracted to lots of artists in my life. Artists can have a certain sense of very creative flowing. But unless those artists have their feet on the ground, it has no foundation. It has no root to it. But if it does, then it can be great art can come out of that. So you have to have that ability to adapt is absolutely essential. Adapt to what is. And that's the second chakra positive side to that. But of course, the word, the term wishy-washy, it won't stick to anything, can't be firm to be counted upon. That's the same chakra, but it's the different side. And you see different quality is being brought out. And so within each of us, we have these two sides. And what we want to do is we want to stimulate the positive side of wherever we are on this spiritual journey. And so you find, going back to the Muladhara, we want to encourage that firmness of purpose that goes with that, and to stimulate that and establish that upward movement. Now, there's with each chakra, and I think the larger question here is, how do we, you might say, how do you stimulate these chakras? And we're coming in, we're referencing that. With each chakra, you want to bring out the positive qualities in those. Now, they manifest themselves in certain attitudes. You can see this in people's where their consciousness tends to be rooted. If you're rooted in that Muladhara chakra, I mentioned you're perhaps a stubborn person, or a person who's very fixed. They don't like change. You just can't change them. They're just, no, I'm here, and I'm not going to do that or that. And I think perhaps it's because of fear, maybe, or whatever it is. They're rooted. Certain attitudes express themselves to you can notice with that. Well, if you want to energize that chakra, and what energizing it means is you're pulling attention to it, you're magnetizing it, you're stimulating a flow of energy in that chakra. What you want to do is one thing you can do very handily is work on your attitudes. This is one of the first and easiest, maybe not so easy actually, but it's accessible. People's attitudes become fixed rather soon in life, but if you can start to work on those attitudes, and you work on it, and in changing the attitude, you begin to actually loosen up those blockages, and you begin to direct that energy flow in that chakra in a positive direction, where you begin to bring out the positive side of that chakra by working on the attitudes. Interestingly, Swami Kriyananda, my teacher, he, taking this principle of attitudes and combining them with Hatha Yoga, which also has, it's often not emphasized these days or too much, but Hatha Yoga affects the chakras. It stimulates the chakras. It can stimulate the chakras very subtly if the teacher knows what they're doing. And what Swamiji did is he combined these two principles. The fact that just physically, by the very practice of the Hatha Yoga pose, there's a stimulation of different glands in the physical body. That's how often modern yoga teachers talk, well, this will help this gland or that gland, which is true. But on a deeper level, its intention is it stimulates a certain chakra behind there, or removes blockages, you might say. Swami combined that with using an affirmation that's associated with that chakra. So he would come in, so like Vajrasana, you could that's puts a little bit of stimulation on the Muladhara chakra, sitting there, and you're just the aspect of sitting there firmly. I'm firm. You know, that's you're mentally affirming that. I'm very firm, I'm fixed, I'm poised. And in the sitting in that, with repetition of that mental thought, you begin to enhance that, and you begin not only physically to be able to influence that chakra, but also through the attitudes, and mentally begin to stimulate it. And you begin to create an energy flow begins to happen in that chakra. And this is what we do when we begin to practice, or any sort of techniques that stimulate the chakras. What we're trying to do when we say stimulate is we're trying to get an upward energy flow. Now, Swami and Swami Kriyananda and Paramahansa Yogananda mentioned something. He said, the chakras, these lower 6 chakras, you can separate them into 2 halves. There's the top half, the heart, the throat, and the Agya chakra. These are considered spiritual chakras, generally, because they're in the upper half. What we're trying to do from a spiritual perspective is stimulate a flow of life force in a positive, which by that I mean upward direction, or upward and inward direction, as opposed to outward and down direction. So because of the 2 halves, he says it's much better to concentrate on the upper half chakras in your daily life. And in terms of stimulating the chakras, he said stimulate the upper 3 rather than stimulating the bottom 3. Now, why? One is these bottom 3 chakras are associated with the material body, physical body. And although you can stimulate, if you're very able, you can stimulate and draw them up. It's like we did that in our initial visualization. I said, stimulate that Muladhara chakra, release it, and draw it up. Well, that's a good practice. But if you start focusing too much on those lower chakras, what will happen is your general focus of your energy in your spine as a whole will be pulled down from the top to the bottom. And so he said, be careful about that. It's better to focus on the upper 3, and that way, concentrating upon them, you create the magnet in the upper 3, which will generally pull the energy from the lower chakras up. But it's not to say that there are specific mudras, specific exercises, specific Hatha Yoga exercises that do stimulate the lower chakras. But in general, remember you want to bring that up. It's not a matter of just stimulating. You have to stimulate them up and release that energy up. And so you might say also what Swamiji said in his writings was to stimulate the upper 3 chakras and remove the blocks from the lower 3 chakras. Those blockages that are keeping us bound to being stubborn or to be fixed. And just sort of, what are those things? And just mentally try to get rid of those and try to get rid of those things, and slowly the energy will be brought upward. So so some of the qualities I mentioned is you have the Muladhara chakra, the sense of stubbornness. Just a quick overview: the Swadhisthana is a fluid. It's a water. It's more fluid. The ability to be adaptable to life's changes. The 3rd chakra, Manipur, is to be that sense of fiery self-control, that warrior aspect of Arjuna that was expressed, he was an expression of that chakra, to be able to control oneself, to be able to have the energy to be self-controlled and to be directing ourselves upward. The sense of the heart here is the chakra here associated with love, divine love, that expansive love that we liberate and we stimulate. This is why you can see the negative side of self-control. Person can become ruthless. You see people that are very powerful, but they're ruthless. They're negative. It's in that strong self-control is a downward flow, and so we have to be careful what we stimulate sometimes. Whereas here you have this devotional heart quality. The negative side of that, of course, is when devotion is directed outward and downward, it becomes emotion, and so people become very emotional, and that's an outward expression of that, usually because of attachment, of frustrations, lack of fulfillment of desires. Those sorts of things. But positively, this is you could say this is almost the essential beginning point of the spiritual path. Just to digress about that, Swami Swami Sri Yukteswar, who was Paramahansa Yogananda's guru, he made a very important point. He said, the spiritual path really begins by developing the magnetism of the heart here at this point, but not the emotional side, the devotional side. He says we have to be able to develop magnetism of the heart in order to attract to us what we need spiritually. He says we often think that we are going out to find what we need. I'm going to find that book, or I'm going to go to that discourse, or I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do that. But he says really what we're doing is when we just begin to develop the magnetism of the heart, we begin to attract to ourselves those things that we need. And somehow the universe, God's, begins to respond to us, and we begin to receive that. And from that, the spiritual life begins. He said, you even made a statement. He said, the devotee cannot take one step on the spiritual path without development of the heart's natural love. Now, he said natural love. Remember that. It's our nature. So something that's natural is there waiting to be revealed. In other words, it's not a matter of having to gain it so much as to remove all of those things that are preventing it from being expressed. And that's what we're trying to do in life, is just uncover that natural side of ourselves, and it expresses. So that's the heart, you might say. And from the heart, we then move up to the Vishuddha chakra. This is associated, as I mentioned already, with deep calmness, and also deep or great expansion. A sense of expansion takes place at this point. So you should remember this. If you're in a tense situation, speak from here. Just try to put your attention here at this point, and you'll find that your sense of self will begin to be calmed, and also your voice will begin to calm other people as well as you're talking to them. Whereas imagine if you put at that moment of tension, you put yourself, you're in the emotions. Well, we all know what happens then. So bring it there. Try to speak from that point. Now, at the same time, we then move up to this Agya chakra, and this Agya chakra, this is the you might say the focus of the spiritual path is learning to change the polarity of that chakra from the negative pole to the positive pole here at the point between the eyebrows. It's said that man lives, his seat, our seat of awareness, rests in the medulla oblongata. And what we're trying to do in the process of the spiritual search for enlightenment is to transfer that seat from here to here. This is the essence of what the spiritual path is. We want to awaken this point and move it from here. Now, think about this. The negative pole here, this controls. What does the medulla control? I mentioned it controls the heart, controls the breath. The breath is represented by this movement in the Irdhanda Pingala, up and down, which has the effect of polarizing all of the chakras. What we're trying to do, and so consequently, you could say this is the seat that is causing the polarization. The left and the right is duality. It's representation of duality. Living in this physical world of duality is living from the medulla oblongata. And what we're trying to do is bring those together and transfer our seat here to the point between the eyebrows, the positive pole. In essence, what I'm saying, this is the seat of ego, right here at the medulla oblongata, in the negative pole of the Agya chakra. And we want to bring it here to the seat of enlightenment here at the point between the eyebrows. When this happens, then when we have brought the seat of our consciousness to one-pointed unity at the point between the eyebrows, it's at that point that we can take the energy up to the Sahasrara. That's when the Sahasrara comes into place. But before that, as long as we are seated in the ego, we cannot attain liberation. It's only when we have transcended and gone beyond ego, which means we have moved our seat here, that we can then attain liberation and take the energy, take the life force up to the point, up to the top of the head, to that point there. So oftentimes, I mention this because often you will be reading about various techniques of meditating on the Sahasrara, pulling the energy up the spine, through the sixth chakra at the ego, up to the point between the eye, up to the top of the head. All I can say is Yogananda did not recommend that, because what you're doing is you're going from the ego to an attempt to achieve liberation, and it doesn't happen that way. It has to first be centered here at the point between the eyebrows, and that's our task right now. That's us outside of that garden gate. We're outside the garden gate trying to get in, which means we're sitting here on this seat and we're trying to get here. And that's what we're doing. And if we want to really know about these chakras, by the way, I forgot the colors and I forgot the shapes and all of those things that are associated with each of these. You'll see these lights sometimes when you go into it. When you get a flow, a positive flow going in any of these chakras, and sometimes they happen spontaneously. These things happen, and you'll get a strong positive flow up through one of these chakras. Look in the spiritual eye, and you'll perhaps see a light. And there's different colors associated with this. You'll see, you go to any shop, and you'll see a chakra chart. Some shops that sell such things, and you'll see a chakra chart, and you'll see this rainbow of colors for the chakras. And I like Swami Kriyananda, my teacher, was a very kind man, and so he didn't like to say anything negative. But somebody mentioned, he says, "Oh, are those the colors of the chakras that you see when they're activated?" And Swami said, no, that's not what you see. And then he basically listed the colors that you do see when you see them, as Yogananda also said. And he said, well, what about those charts? And Swami said, well, think of them this way. They're a poetic representation. And I thought, that's a nice word. They're poetic. They're not literal. They're poetic. And poetic in the sense of red is usually associated with materialism, and blue is associated with spirituality, and so they go in that order. But they're not literal. But what you will see is the real colors. And again, I'm going to leave it to Sagar to go into those. But you'll also begin to hear, and these are measures that people want to know. How do I know if I'm really perceiving a true experience of the chakra? And I think there's a few things that you can look for. One, if there's a strong flow in that chakra, you're going to feel upliftment, you see. You're not going to feel downward. Now, if you're feeling downward, it could be that there's a negative flow there, in which case you want to stay away from that. But if there's an upward flow, which is a positive stimulation, there's going to be a feeling of upliftment. Just think of this. Person walks into the room, and their posture is bad, they're slumped over, and if they said, how do you feel? Oh, I feel very joyful. Their posture doesn't reflect it. Their attitude doesn't reflect it. Their general demeanor is not up. It doesn't reflect it. These outward things have to reflect. And particularly attitude. If a person has a positive attitude associated with that, that's a good indicator. But also, if that flow is very strong, you may be able to, if you meditate, and this is, again, I hope you do meditate and develop a deep meditation practice. This is one of the ways to knock on that gate. You can't just go up to the gate and you gotta boom, because and make some noise there. So that's your devotion, you see. With devotion, you've got to knock on that door. You got to get, and that's what we do with our meditation practice and other techniques. In our tradition, we do Kriya Yoga. We knock. But if you have that strong flow, you'll begin to see that. One of the other things, though, and a very significant one, is not only will you perhaps see something, most people don't see. If they're not visually oriented, it's too much. But people will begin to hear. There are certain sounds associated with each of the chakras that will begin to manifest, typically in the right ear, but not necessarily, but you'll begin to hear that are not physical sounds, but they're astral sounds. And they will begin, and if you hear those sounds, that is a good sign. There's signs of a buzzing bee, or wind in the trees, or a plucked instrument like a veena or a harp, or crickets, or why does Krishna play a flute? That's one of the sounds, the sound of a flute. And that's actually, in thinking about, I mentioned harp, that's why harp. Church bells, deep church bell, boom. These are representations of sounds that are heard in deep meditation, and particularly when a chakra is stimulated. Now, there are techniques that you can use to intentionally listen for those sounds, not to create them, but to intentionally listen to those sounds and begin to pick them out. And as you intentionally listen, you begin to stimulate them a little bit, you see. And also, as you begin to listen, just like if you look very hard here at the point between the eyebrows, it affirms a principle in the yogic practices. Wherever you put your attention, you're going to stimulate something. So if you put your attention, there's a series of exercises in Yogananda's tradition. We put our attention on different muscles and tense them. We energize those muscles. If you put your attention at the point between the eyebrows, you're going to create a magnet at that point. That magnet draws energy up to that point. If you put your attention very hard, very firmly on listening, particularly if you can hear a sound, by listening, you're creating a magnet in your head again, drawing the life force up to the brain. But you also, by listening to that sound, you stimulate that sound. It increases. Putting your attention on something draws focus to it. And so if we have any of these manifestations of these chakra properties, and if we can perceive them, and if we focus on them in our meditation practice, it'll stimulate those chakras. Now, in everyday life, you and I how do we affect our chakras in everyday life? I think the easiest and the most useful way is to go back to this principle I mentioned about learning to pay attention to your attitudes. An attitude can very much affect how your whole flow of life force. For example, it's something I'm sure all of you have at some point of your life had a devotional urge. You've had some devotion. Now you feel devotion in the heart. I mean, that's a heart quality. If you stimulate a devotional urge, prayer, chanting, thinking, doing arati with attention, or puja with any ritual with attention, you stimulate devotion, and you're going to stimulate that chakra, and by stimulating, you'll magnetize, create an upward flow. And this is what we want to do, is to create that upward flow. Now, when we bring these together and create a very strong upward flow, we find that what begins to happen, and if you concentrate on that, your attention will be drawn away from the physical body, and you'll go into the inner world. You'll begin to go into that inner world. That's how we get to that kingdom's gate. We have to withdraw from the outer world, from the distractions of the noise and so on. For that, we meditate. Secondly, we have to be able to calm the breath, because it makes a lot of noise and it's very distracting. When to go deeper and deeper. That's pranayama of different exercises. Slow regulates the breath. We've got to then interiorize ourselves with concentration. That's going to that garden's gate and focusing on that. There is a doorway. There is a doorway into that inner kingdom within each one of us. And it's right here at the point between the eyebrows. There's a term in the yogic tradition called Sushumna Dwara. Literally, the gate of the Sushumna's gate, the door of the Sushumna. Where is that door? Some people think, well, the Sushumna begins at the coccyx center down there to Muladhara. Maybe the door is there. No, the door is not there. The door is here at the point between the eyebrows. We have to bring our attention to that door, camp ourselves at that door, and knock. Not just like that. And that's our devotional fervor. We have to do that. Now, I'd take it one step further. That door finally opens, of course, and when we enter into that inner garden, we then no longer need to rely upon what's been told to us, but we see the chakras are revealed to us, because at that point we've entered into that astral realm. And that's where we're going with the spiritual path. But then we see the chakras, and then we begin the great journey of lifting that energy up on the far side of those chakras to the palace that's on that other side of those fountains that the chakras could be representative of. It's there we're going. But now we're inside that garden, and it's no longer a matter of hearing about it. So that's what we need. Now, coming back, there's one element that also I feel needs to be brought in, is it's very difficult for me, if I was to sit in that chair over there, it would be very difficult for me to lift myself off the floor with that. I would grab both sides of that chair, and I'd lift and I'd lift and I'd struggle. I wouldn't make very good progress. So I could try very hard. I need help getting off that floor. And this, of course, is where the role of the Guru takes place. All of this done under the Guru's grace, the Guru's guidance, and the help of the Guru's blessings has to be also part of this. Because we're never going to be able to lift ourselves off of that to get from here to here. We can do much up until that point, but that final jump from here to here, we do need that Guru's help. And you could say the magnetization of the heart that we've talked about, you can't take one step without it. Getting the heart involved, what does it do? It attracts to us what we need. And what attracts to us mostly is spiritual guidance also. The heart will attract that guidance to us, and it appears in many forms. And it appears in many preliminary forms, but ultimately we want to attract that Guru's guidance. And I think in this tradition, of course, our Guru, Paramahansa Yogananda, is the Guru of this work, but we attract representatives, we attract books, we attract helpful material, and through that magnetism of drawing that grace to us, we find in that way, very subtly, it's not our effort that opens that door. We have to, of course, participate, but it's a very heavy door, and we need help opening it. and it's through Guru's grace that that door is opened even further. So this step-by-step path of the chakras is one, learn to become first, try to live more in an awareness of the chakras. Feel that in a sense. Feel and act, particularly from the upper three. When you're speaking with other people and you're wanting to be sincere, speak from the heart. Isn't this even an expression? I'm speaking from my heart. I mean, that's putting yourself, feel as if you're speaking from there. Calmness, feel as if you're speaking from here. Willpower, this is also here, speak from there. Actually, one thing, if you do want to work on these lower three chakras, the Gurus recommend that don't so much focus on those lower threes. It's focus on the upper three, but focus if you feel you want to increase this willpower, for example, here of the Manipur. You feel you need to do that. It says focus on the complementary chakra in the upper three, which in this case would be here, at the point between the eyebrows, the positive pole. And you'll find, and similarly with the other two, focus on that one. It'll help bring that lower chakra into harmony, into balance, because there's a relationship between the upper three and the lower three also. So focus on, make your awareness dynamic of where the chakras are. Try to express the attitudes positively that are associated with them. If you know that you're a little bit, you can see you're having certain troubles, there's some attitude, focus on that. And then you can, there are techniques, if you're a Hatha Yogi practitioner, it's a wonderful exercises to do. You can combine them with these attitudes. We teach Hatha Yoga as well. There's other techniques that you can learn that are in the classes that we teach, the various steps that lead ultimately to the practice of Kriya Yoga. Those are also taught by Sagar and the team of other teachers that are here. Practice these, and you'll find that little by little, you can begin to integrate and feel as if you're bringing each of these chakras are coming into balance. Study the positive sides. Stay away from the negative sides. I think I would leave it at that. But this is a fascinating subject, and if you are interested in it further, I would definitely recommend, we have a couple of books that are available. There's one of them, I hope they're out on the book table out there. Chakras for Starters is a nice beginning one that'll get you started. I would recommend that out there. Then also, when Sagar announces his workshop, you can come to that workshop and you'll be able to answer all your questions, I suspect, at that time, and go deeper into the specifics. We have a number of handouts that can be given with this, and all of the various qualities and so forth can be delved into at that time. So I hope you avail yourself of the opportunities. And finally, the summation of all of the various techniques, all of the various attitudes and everything that we teach here in the Ananda Sangha are embodied in this science of Kriya Yoga. And Paramahansa Yogananda synthesized and brought all of this into the teachings that surround Kriya Yoga to make that successful, or that practice successful. Through the techniques that we practice in Kriya, we learn to listen to those sounds. We learn to calm the breath. Ideally, deep practice, we transcend the breath. We learn to magnetize the spine, which is what the essence of the Kriya technique is, learning to dynamically create a magnet in the spine. And in that magnetization, you notice what happens in a physical magnet. You put something is set in a default position, but the molecules go off. You put it again in a strong magnet, it pulls everything back into their default alignment. In a sense, this is what Kriya Yoga does. It magnetizes the spine and it draws life force away from the periphery and brings us up to that garden gate. And eventually, with Guru's grace, that gate is opened and we can enter into that inner kingdom. So many blessings to you, and I hope you've enjoyed today's presentation.